Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Well, introduce, Billy. Get everything rolling, buddy.
All right. Well, a couple of familiar faces here, guys. Two guys we've had on quite a bit on this podcast. Paul Bleau, who is up there in Quebec, Canada.
Yeah.
Although looking at your background, Paul, it certainly doesn't look like you're in Canada right now.
No, it's not where I'm in Canada. My background is where I am not, and I wouldn't mind being.
Exactly. Exactly. And Mark Adamczyk. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. Sean, how are you all?
Good. Fantastic.
It actually is 80 degrees here in South Florida today, so sorry about that.
Yeah,
No.
thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah, right.
We won't even tell you the temperature here.
I don't even look anymore.
Oh, geez. Well, where's here again? Remind me, because
Northeast Pennsylvania. It's probably just as cold here as it is where you are in Canada. Maybe colder. We're about, what are we today, Billy? 25 maybe? It's a heat wave today.
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Oh, so you're under freezing, right?
Oof.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've got my turkey on the balcony, so it gives you an idea. It's as good as I have no space left in the freezer, but there are no worries.
Yeah, that's what I do in the winter. If our freezer is full, I just put stuff in the garage because it stays frozen. So, All right. So, Sean, we got a lot to get to today.
Yeah, and we want to thank Professor Bleau for coming on, kind of a last minute replacement for Andrew. He had something come up, so thank you for coming on last minute. But we want to talk about, the file release and new updates, any developments. So if you or Mark, whoever wants to start, but let's start with any new developments.
Well, Paul, I mean, what do you think? Do you want to take a crack at it, or do you want me to?
We can both. I mean, real quick, I can tell you what I'm working on. I think the last time I was on your show, we talked about the Pepe letters.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a few weeks when you come back. We'll expand on that a little
more. Talk about it, but just so you know what we will talk about.
Okay.
I formed a little working group. People who had looked into the Pepe letters before, not just me. And that includes Doug Campbell, Bill Simpich, and Dave Boylan. And, I'm bringing this up. It's funny because, there's all sorts of differences that people can have in the research community about certain people and certain things. But there's, when it gets down to research or knowledge, you have to be colorblind, right? You have to, you just have to say, well, and I don't, like, I work very closely with Mark, Andrew, and Jim and Matt Crumpton, and we've developed a really great relationship, with the book Chokeholds. But every now and then, you can have situations whereby you want to go into another area of research, and boy, and I'm not pointing anybody directly, but things are happening where there could be rivalries or whatever, but the information is still there. You know what I mean? It's still in a certain
Sure.
place, and you go get it. You're like truth is blind, right? So, but what we're working on, just so you know, is we're finding more and more links between what happened during the missile crisis plot, the Pepe letters in 1962, what happened with Oswald in 63, specifically incriminatory letters that were sent in both instances, and things to make potential patsies look pro-Castro, right? That's same thing happened in 62, same thing happened in 63, but now we have a third plot, rumored plot, and it's a plot that not many people talk about. Malcolm Blunt was intrigued by this plot, and it was called the Chicom plot, okay, a Chinese communist plot, okay, to make certain people, namely one guy called Cortez, look like he was an agent, who was involved in organizing something whereby the Chinese communists, like how Kostakov, it was the Russians and Cubans around Oslo. But now there's another thing that happened in 64 and quickly died because they wanted to go the lone nut route, but there's a lot of paper trails around a Chinese communist plot that sort of was, coming out in December 63 and January 64. And it was another one of these types of things that would have made Cortez potentially look like he was in cahoots with Oswald and the Chinese communists. Now, the thing that we're finding more and more are names that are involved in all three. In other words, before we were saying it was the same MO, but we're actually finding players whose names pop up in all three. So what that would mean again, is there's a template. There's a guiding hand, and the guiding hand was there in 62 during the missile crisis and didn't end up working or anything, and was there in 63, and certainly elements of the guiding hand were there for the 64 plot. And then, you have things, all three have links, a Fair Play for Cuba committee link, all three.
And you also have the Chicago plot too.
Yeah, well, the thing with these three is there's a bigger paper trail. Like the Chicago plot, it was so, you're right, because I wrote in Chokeholes, we have a chapter on the prior plots, including Tampa, where there's a Fair Play for Cuba committee plot link, including LA, where there's another one, and including, even a guy called Santiago Garriga in Miami. So you're looking at, and I think, Mark, you'll be interested in this, is if you talk Fair Play for Cuba linking, right? When you link Fair Play for Cuba committee linking, who's the specialist who was involved in a project called AmSanta, who was looking to turn the FPCC inside out, and who's really good at that kind of scenario, David Atlee Phillips. Right.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, and then you have a William Harvey, whose name is becoming pretty prominent, who you look at what this, where this creates smoke, what it centers around. You're always looking at these two characters.
Sure.
And that's what's so interesting in this, is because you can't take one document on its own and say it's a smoking gun document. But when you put things together and you say, well, wait a minute, that document, you can explain it maybe, but you can't explain, it can't be happenstance what's happening in the separate document. So I don't want to make it too complicated because we're still thrashing it out, but we should have an interesting story to tell in January.
And if you could get one of those guys that you're working with on, that'll be fantastic. If you
Oh,
can
yeah.
put your
Yeah.
Boylan,
Sure.
that'll be fantastic.
Sure. We can do that for
Okay.
sure.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, my focus is the JFK Records Act for the most part, and that, like anyone, that takes me into areas of interest when I'm thinking about records that have been disclosed or that are known to exist and that have been buried or withheld. And so it's been an interesting year for that, for sure. We had Representative Luna's task force got off to a very fast start in March and April when you know five National Archives released upwards of 2,600 records. We can get into the problems with the release in a second and how it's difficult to make sense of what it really is when there's not really yet a basis of a full collection at the National Archives. But that's a whole show in itself. But so there's the release that followed Trump's order. People were scrambling to see what's new and whatnot. And then there are two very good hearings on April 1st and May 20th. On April 1st, Jim and Eugenio Oliver Stone, Jeff Morley, put some really good stuff out there. It was got a wide amount of attention, and it was you're kind of like uh, kind of pinching yourself, thinking, are we really in 2025 hearing congressional testimony on the JFK case again? It hadn't happened since the late 70s.
Sure.
So, very, and of course, with Jim being there, one of our co-authors on chokeholds, and explaining to the world the problems with CE 399 and the single bullet and all that, and to us, we've heard this so many times, and it's not anything new. But just to have the world hear that instead of how it's still a problem in 2025 is just remarkable. And so, that segued into a second hearing that didn't get as much attention on the news, anyways. But I think that one was even better in a lot of ways because of the different witnesses you had that went into really focused areas in the case that if the final report that the task force is going to issue, we can talk about that, hopefully expands on some of those topics that were talked about in the investigation that could still come out of it. Primarily, I'm talking about Doug Horn, who the military analyst for the Records Review Board from the 90s, talked about the photographs and the autopsy and the x-rays and all of the difficulties and discoveries that the review board fortunately made. And so if you just take that in a bubble and you listen to Mr. Horn's testimony and see how that investigation could be completed on the autopsy and the military records and the photographs. If you remember, he talked extensively about the review board's findings from John Stringer, the photographer, and how he could not even verify the pictures he took of Kennedy as compared to what's publicly available, things like that. Dan Hardway testified, HSCA investigator from the late 1970s. Him and Ed Lopez were tasked by the House Select Committee to investigate Oswald, Mexico City, and the CIA, and ended up issuing a report which was not declassified until the late 90s through the review board. And I was listening to one of Mr. Hardway's talks the other day that he gave in 2017. And it's still, I mean, the assumption is that it's fully declassified now. It's called their report. I should back up. It's called the Lopez report. It really should be called the Hardway Lopez report. But they issued a 300 and some odd page report on Mexico City and their investigation into what Oswald was or was not really doing there. And as of 2017, there's still missing portions of it that Ed Lopez had prepared. And that's in fact, Dan Hardway even filed a Freedom of Information request lawsuit for Ed Lopez recently to obtain the rest of their files and reports on their Mexico City investigation. So that's very interesting. Of course, Dan Hardway on May 20th in the Luna hearing talked about George Joannides quite a bit on how his investigation into their area was significantly impeded when George Joannides came into the picture. and slowed down, in fact, almost came to a grinding halt any way or process for them to continue to get records in a streamlined manner from the agency. So that, of course, that story is not old. Jefferson Morley has really expanded on it. Representative Luna was able to get more files on Joannides, but I think if you go back to, Hardway's statement and whether he meant to get this far in his testimony or not, but he was there, he was being asked questions about what he did and what he was looking into. He said, "Look, after all the work that I did, me and Ed Lopez did, and all the interrogations of Dave Phillips and Ann Goodpasture and all the things that they were putting together on what really happened in Mexico City, he couldn't come to any other conclusion other than that Oswald was used operationally in Mexico City." I mean, those were his words.
Wow.
And I found it interesting with that powerful a statement having been made by Mr. Hardway under oath, who was a living, breathing, intelligent, knowledgeable witness on that investigation, for him to say that, and then really for there to be no follow-up questions on that from the task force. Again, I know they have so much time, and they had to get through a lot of witnesses, and they were trying to also investigate like 9 other conspiracies.
But I
But
don't understand the importance of that, though. I don't think,
Right.
Mark.
Yeah, it's
yeah, what's
amazing.
that?
Don't have the knowledge. They don't understand the importance
Yeah,
of all that because they don't have the back knowledge that we do.
right.
That's
Yeah, I
why.
just would. So I'm hoping that the final report will highlight that testimony and say that the remaining records withheld in the legislative archives, the HSCA archives, whatever on the HSCA investigation can be released in full, and so that would be a great step. And then, of course, Judge Thunheim testified and said incredible things that he's really never said before publicly about the review board's troubles with the agencies and how they were waited out, so to speak, until they could shuffle on and be done. They only had essentially 3.5 years to declassify millions of records, and we're now seeing the remnants of that here in 2025 when records are now coming out well after the mandatory deadline from the law, and we're still not able to make complete sense of if it's a complete release or not.
Mark, talk to me about you emailed me about you were saying about the real reason that Tannenbaum and Sprague were forced to resign from
Yeah.
the HSCA had to do with the fact that they were you really digging into Mexico City and digging into JM Wave. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. What happened was, and this was a talk that Robert Tannenbaum gave on another show not that long ago, when he was being interviewed about his investigation. So him and Dick Sprague were initially hired by the House Select Committee in 1976 to lead the legal investigation as lead attorneys for that committee. And they were serious lawyers, no agenda, and they wanted to look at it with a clean slate. So what Mr. Tannenbaum said is that he had a meeting with Richard Schweiker, who at the time was leading a subcommittee of the church committee investigation into intelligence activities surrounding the assassination and other plots. And I guess he had a conversation with Senator Schweiker, where he was able to get a file from what the evidence that they had compiled, Schweiker and Hart, the two legislators who got the ball rolling for the church committee, and he gave it to or discussed it with Bob Tannenbaum, and off they went on their way. They said, "Take this for what it is. We think there's a lot to see here with respect to the CIA and its involvement, but we know you're going to do an honest investigation. But this is what we have found so far." That being Schweiker and Hart. So as they were doing their work and looking into JM Wave in Mexico City and Oswald, they were drilling down on those issues. And when this is my best recollection of what Mr. Tannenbaum said, when they wanted to get a second crack, a second interview under oath of David Phillips, and the surveillance down there and the photographs and the telephone calls and all those types of things that they were investigated, they were essentially stopped in their tracks by Lou Stokes and the HSCA. They didn't have the support politically to continue to go there with the investigation. And that's what led to Tannenbaum and Sprague having to back away. They weren't going to do a compromised investigation.
Professor, you want to go into the importance of that and the importance of Mexico
Yeah.
City, why we need to really, find out what other records are out there on Mexico City and on J.M. Wade.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the best books on the Sprague and Tannenbaum removal. I mean, they were forced out. Is Destiny Betrayed by Jim DiEugenio.
Absolutely,
They
yeah.
really he really covers that well. Mark is spot on. Because what happened is that there was a passing of the baton, right, from the church committee to the HSCA. And Mark is alluding to some briefing meetings between Tannenbaum and Schweiker, right? Schweiker of the church committee. And Tannenbaum's reaction coming out of that meeting is that Schweiker is pretty well saying the CIA has something to do with the assassination. I mean, Tannenbaum's on the record of saying that.
Right.
So obviously, deep down, the reason Sprague and Tannenbaum were bumped was because they were going to look at the CIA not as an investigator helping them, but as a
Right.
potential witness or a potential, a potential suspect.
Yeah.
That, forget it. Okay, so that's when they're done, right? Whereas if you go to the Warren Commission, they relied on the FBI and the CIA. Sprague had a different philosophy. He says, no, no, you're a suspect in this whole thing, obviously. Yeah. And then he famously said, everywhere you look with Oswald, you have the fingerprints of intelligence. So,
Sure.
I think you don't have much more damning than that. So when the key is when Blakey came in, they had a guy who was mob centric. So
Yeah.
so he's mob centric. So he'll get them looking in a different direction. And
Sure.
that's where you get all this Oswald stuff and his uncle linked with
Yes.
Marcello and all this stuff. But they never ask themselves the question is how does the mob rig an autopsy? And how does the mob do this subterfuge in Mexico City?
Right.
Because if you get down to Mexico City, the reason that's so important is that you find what the real original plot was. The real original plot wasn't a lone nut. It was to make Oswald look like he was in cahoots with Cuban agents
Right.
and Kostikov,
That's
so
what Jan.
that the Americans would have their excuse to invade the island. They would say, look, it was sort of a Northwoods type stratagem. So that's why Mexico, and the second you say someone was impersonated, Oswald was impersonated. Okay, someone took on his identity. Case closed. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is a 24-year-old or 23-year-old loner, being being impersonated? So that's then you get into the questioning, okay, of because the all the lies around the broken cameras and the broken microphones and the destroyed, that's all BS. Obviously, they're not all destroyed. We even have proof that in December, uh, Witten, using the name Skelso, was asking Mexico City to identify the voices on the tapes. Okay, there's a tape. That's one file I found that, hey, not identify the voices. It's not who was speaking. Tell me which voice would belong to which person. You guys are down there. So, but the other big thing that happened there, right, is the multiple attempts at linking Oswald to Cuban agents. And they were lies by Alvarado, they were lies by June Cobb, they were lies by a bunch of people. And when Hardway and Lopez questioned Phillips, they said, well, all these false flags, they're your people, they work for you. And he was forced to admit that.
Right.
So, so then you get into, oh, that's an interesting link onto who's behind the assassination. So obviously, if you talk to Phillips, you're going to get the mother lode if he's forced to talk, right? So, that to me is that, Garrison suspected in Mexico City there was so much
You did.
behind that, and sorry, I'm just having all sorts of weird things pop up on my screen. I got rid of them, and now there's this. I don't know why, and there's this thing. Sorry, guys.
All right.
So, in answer to your question, is that if you dug deeper, right, and you went into the Vessiana lead was by Gaetan Fonzi. He was making a lot of headway around JM Wave. You were finally uncovering all sorts of things. Then you have Betsy Wolfe. Betsy Wolfe finds out
Well,
about Betsy Wolfe is a staffer for the HSCA who finds out, say, well, wait a minute, the way Oswald's file was handled when he went to Russia, it's more an of security
yeah.
file than it is for a Soviet Russian
So,
division
Russia, yeah.
file. So you
Mhm.
get into, well, was it used to be finding them all? So all that stuff that, is that would have confirmed that Oswald was on a mission in Russia. He was on a mission when he was with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, that there was some sort of stratagem to make Oswald into the perfect patsy, a perfect patsy that would have allowed for Americans to, have the excuse they need to invade the island. So in answer to your question, you can imagine why the CIA didn't want anybody to go there.
Right. And Tannenbaum's important because he was a prosecutor in Manhattan, and I believe he never lost a murder case. I believe. So I mean, for him to be investigating this, I mean, he's the wrong guy that the CIA wants, looking into this. And one of the things is he also seen that um, training video, right, where he's seen David Atlee Phillips, and I believe it at Guy Bannister's camp where he's seen him
Well,
with
is it in Lake
Harry,
Pontchartrain? I think it
Lake
was Lake
Pontchartrain.
Pontchartrain. Lake
Mhm.
Pontchartrain. And to my memory, there's Phillips is in there, Oswald is in there, and I believe Bannister is in there. I don't know
Was
about
it Barry?
Ferry, but the second you have Phillips near Oswald, which
Oh
he
yeah,
said he saw, you're done again.
yeah.
And the interesting thing about Lake Pontchartrain, and there's a file on this, is when it was closed down as a camp, it had to be sanitized. And sanitized mean check for explosives and things like that. So you know when you name that. So you know who signed the document saying that it was all A-OK, that it was sanitized? It was David Atlee Phillips. He signed the clearance or the clearance, he gave it the clean bill of health to be saying, well, okay, we're
This is
done there.
everywhere.
Everything's remote. It was
Everywhere.
Phillips, yeah.
Yeah, he's connected to everyone. Let me ask you guys a question. Why do you feel that we don't have enough files on Phillips? Like why do you feel like there seems to be a boatload on Angleton and Harvey, but not as much on Phillips, and they're probably more being withheld, I would imagine, on David Atlee Phillips. Why do you guys feel that way?
Or do you want me to
Well,
go?
I mean,
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sure Paul has some reasons as well. I mean, he was anywhere you look in the late fall of 1963. There's not more, other than maybe Bill Harvey. There's not more of a prevailing character.
Uh,
He had set up the DRE, if I'm correct, Paul. He had kind of founded those types of organizations. Of course, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and the infiltration, which Oswald was a part of in New Orleans, and then he was also, you know, in charge of the Cuban operations out of Mexico City. And when Hardway and Lopez figured out he really wasn't in Mexico City when Oswald was allegedly there, he was actually in Langley, and monitoring what I believe was the reactions at the embassies to either Oswald or more likely the imposter, who they told all kinds of lies about the pulse cameras and those types of things. And in fact, Hardway and Lopez wanted to indict Phillips and Goodpasture because of their lies about just the pulse camera system and that type of footage. I mean, Oswald was supposed to be there upwards of 10 times, 5 times to each embassy, couldn't produce a single picture of it. So it goes on and on. But right, why aren't there? I know there's something that was sent, and Paul, you can maybe explain this better. From Mexico City Station up to Langley, that was I think it was called a manifest or some sort of package for Phillips for him to get
A pouch.
the day's work, if you will, of all the monitoring of the embassies, and that is whether that still exists, I doubt it, but that those types of records, I think the answer, Sean, is that because this is so highly freaking sensitive when it comes to Phillips and what he was, if he was just running another Fair Play for Cuba committee operation in Mexico City involving Oswald and maybe seeing how they would react, and maybe if he says he wants to get into Cuba now just to see what their reaction was to that, that's not super high sensitive in terms of that in a bubble. But if
Sure.
it then was also part of an operation involving Oswald being groomed as a patsy for Dallas, well then that's where your problem is, and that's why it's very difficult to get records on him.
Hey, Sean, before we move on, I just want to mention our sponsor, one of our sponsors, DK's Corner, located in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right on Cherry Street, 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Sean, I had a cheesesteak, and I know the ads always mention the cheesesteaks, and we've had a few listeners comment on that. I actually just had one yesterday, and
I thought you were on a diet. But
I am. But I had to, well, the thing is, at work now, we've been ordering from DK's, and I keep smelling, everybody's ordering these cheesesteaks, and I keep smelling them.
They
So
are
yesterday
fantastic.
I broke down, and I had to have one.
It's all right.
It's just, I'll tell you what, Sean, just delish. I love DK's Corner cheesesteaks.
They're the
Dave makes everything himself there. Everything is so fresh. All the food he makes is just incredibly delicious. It's such a really a great menu too. I mean,
It is, Bill. He gets really creative with a lot of the specials he has.
Yeah.
He has really good stuff, and his pizza's fantastic, but he always has incredible specials, Bill.
And there's always different things there that you always have to make sure you check. Go on, look on Facebook, DK's Corner on Facebook, because he's always got different specials, different things. He's
Constantly changing the menu.
Constantly, and that's what keeps it fresh, keeps everything good. So he has breakfast. He has these breakfast bowls in the morning. They're delicious. Everything, like I said, everything he makes is great. He's got kind of a unique cooler in there with different sodas and stuff like that, different drinks. So make sure you call or stop by in Jessup. Again, it's 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. If you're local here in Northeast Pennsylvania, make sure that you stop by and check out DK's Corner. Again, just delicious food, Sean. I know you order from there a lot too.
I order constantly from there, Bill, and so many times that I sent people there. My brother went there, loved it. I had other people. Nathan loves it there. It's just a great place. Sometimes I take it out. Sometimes I even sit there. It's really comfortable. But we get so many people, Bill, listeners and stuff, that said, "Oh, I went to DK's and it was great." I can't tell you how many people. We just had a question episode where people were talking about it. It's just unbelievable place. So definitely check that out.
All right, definitely check out DK's Corner. Go to Facebook, look up DK's Corner. Again, he's located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. DK's Corner. We will be right back. Hey, Sean, I want to make sure that everybody knows about our Patreon. I know we mention it every once in a while on the show, but really important that people check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, or just click on the link in the description, you'll find we do an extra episode every week called The Speakeasy, and it's really usually just Sean and I kind of talking about the day's events, current events, and things like that. But a lot of exciting things. I mean, I know, Sean, you're constantly putting articles up there on our Patreon.
Yeah, and sometimes, Bill, we do bring on special guests. We had Dave Whelan on, we had Scranton Dave, and every now and then we bring Patreon members on. We've had different members, Scott Alfieri, Michael Pilch, Dan Hankey was on. So, there's an opportunity there if you want to come on the show with us. So there's a lot of things we're doing. Like you mentioned, Bill, the articles. I put articles up on a free site, but I also put articles on Patreon that's not available on the free site. We have a lot of times I put up future intel about guests that we have coming up and stuff that we have coming up on the podcast. And we created a great community there, Bill. There's a lot of chat goes on there. There's a community chat and a lot of the comments back and forth. Just the Patreon members always have great insight. So it's a community, Bill, and it's an opportunity for people to join for a really good price, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it. You can certainly become a free member if you want to. There's also tiered levels to with subscription amounts, and just for $1 that gets you everything. I mean, the $1 gets you everything, including our weekly show. There's other tiers. I think, Sean, what is there? A $3 tier?
$3, there's a $5, there's a $10. I mean, and there's a $50 if people could afford to give 50.
Yeah, I mean, totally up to you. Once you join, you can make that decision, and certainly, there's no commitment. I mean, you could join for a month or 2 months or whatever you want, and then you can switch your subscription around. Totally up to you. I mean, that's people love Patreon for that reason. It really is. It makes it easy. It's kind of however you want to do it, however you want to join, and we certainly appreciate anybody who joins our Patreon and supports the show, because we definitely Sean, we're not getting rich off of this podcast, that's for sure. But we definitely, appreciate any support that we get from our listeners.
And, we also have our merchandise store. If people want to check out, we have the shirt that I have on now. We have mugs up there. We have cups, hats, anything you can do to help the podcast grow. We also have a bookshop up there, Bill, where all the authors that we have on our podcast, we have their books up, and it supports local bookstores, Bill. The money goes to local bookstores, a little bit to us, and then to the publisher and to the author. So it's a real good opportunity instead of buying Amazon and making
supporting billionaires.
Right, sure. There's an opportunity. And as far as Patreon, one last thing, Bill, if you want to join as a free member, we do put some stuff up there for the free members, and then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can do that.
Absolutely. So definitely check out our Patreon. Like I said, there's a link in the description to our Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You and look for our logo, and just fill in the information and you can join. All right. That's it, Sean. We appreciate all of our Patreon members, and we hope that you guys will consider checking it out if you haven't joined. Thank you.
I'd like to maybe
Sure.
correct one thing. Is there's a lot of files missing on Harvey that we're trying to get with
Sure.
respect to his
There
travels
is.
in
There is.
'63.
Yeah, there is. No, I didn't mean to imply there was.
No, but you're right to bring it up. So why? I mean, why there's so many missing is they're the ones you want to hide the most.
Sure.
As simple as that. The point is that if you look at Phillips, okay, let's look at Phillips. He did use the pseudonym Maurice Bishop. No matter what anybody says, there are at least 3 or 4 different people who've.
There's more than Bessian.
Oh, yeah. It's more than Vestiana. There's even, I think McCone said, well, I this, and then he said he misspoke or whatever. But I mean, it's a bit hazy, but I know there are at least three people who said that was one of the names that was being used. The reason that's important is that we know that Phillips was stationed in Havana before Castro took over. And that's where he met Vesiana, and that's where he recruited him. Okay, and so Vesiana was one of the most effective. Like he ended up being part of Alpha 66. Well, to deny you knew Vesiana when it's known that you were so involved in starting up Alpha 66 doesn't make any sense. So right away, that doesn't hold any water. So an article I wrote about are the touch points that Oswald and Phillips had in common. Okay, what do I mean by touch points? People that Oswald crossed paths with that Phillips knew. Okay, and let's start off with that infamous New Orleans interview to make him look like a Marxist unhinged, where he's doing it at, I think it's WSDU. And who are the people in that room? You have Oswald. Oswald links to Phillips because Phillips is, overseeing AMSANTA, and AMSANTA is, overlooking the Fair Play for Cuba committee kind of thing.
Right.
and they're involved in they say, hey, we need someone. They ask the FBI for someone or help to get someone part of the Fair Play for Cuba committee who can come in a foreign country to help destabilize the Fair Play for Cuba committee. FBI says yes. A day later, Oswald gets his travel papers done. A day after that, okay? Now, the reason you maybe need the FBI help is technically the CIA can't technically spy on the Fair Play for Cuba committee in the U.S. Who was doing that? It was Warren DeBreeze, right? And others for the FBI. So they had files on that, and they knew who Oswald was. So, there's that. But the second person in the room is who? It's Carlos Bringuer, right? Now, who's Carlos Bringuer? He's the lead representative of the DRE. And as Mark said, who founded the DRE? David Atlee Phillips. And then the third person in the room, key person, is Ed Butler. And Ed Butler is who? He's part of Inca, and he's one of the people doing propaganda using media, radio stations to destabilize communists in Latin America. He links to David Atlee Phillips. What are the odds that you would have one person like David Atlee Phillips connected to the three people in the interview? And it just starts there. There are links between, they were both, De Mohrenschildt and Phillips were both part of a petroleum club.
The Dallas Petroleum Club.
They were both part of that.
In that. Yeah.
Okay, and look, there's like 20 touch points. I mean, even Martino saw Oswald, okay, and Martino links to David Atlee Phillips. So you have all these people who either saw Oswald, touched him, talked to him, or whatever, and you have about 20 common touch points.
Yeah.
No question. So there's no question.
Yeah,
and then if I get into the Pepe letters and like you ask yourself, who could have organized the letters from Cuba, the 5 letters that were incriminatory towards Oswald in 1963? That is from Phillips's playbook. Okay, incriminatory letters, propaganda, making the enemy look like he's responsible for a crime. Those are called black letters. And both Phillips and Harvey are specialized in that kind of black ops. So that's why, it gets really dirty, because then throw into it that Phillips is Mr. Regime change guy, right?
He is, yeah.
You find him in Chile, Guatemala, you find him in. So if you want to really see where the U.S., they want to bring this back, I think, with Venezuela and other things. Well, if you want to see the regime change stratagems of that era, you go to Phillips and Harvey. Those
Absolutely.
and other people of that nature.
Like you said, Phillips connects everywhere, but there's two people that Phillips connects to that to me I think needs to be looked into more. And one of them is Gordon McClendon in the Dallas Radio Man, because McClendon was very close with Jack Ruby. In fact, according to Seth Cantor, and I looked this up, Seth Cantor claims that, and you can take this for what it's worth, but he claims that Ruby, when he was arrested, the first person he asked to talk to was Gordon McClendon. Now, a lot of people assume that, CIA guys went to the mafia to put pressure on Ruby as a contingency plan to take out Oswald after he isn't killed. But I think a perfect way would have been to go Phillips McClendon directly to Ruby, because he had the influence over Ruby to put the pressure on him. And another person I want to mention that Phillips was close to is Claire Booth Luce.
Oh, yeah.
That retired intelligence group or whatever that Phillips started after he retired.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and McClendon and Booth Luce are involved in that. That's very good.
And Harvey, I think you brought it up, Professor, before. Harvey asked for the security clearance to speak to Claire Booth Luce. Well,
okay, so you're right. So that is one of the most amazing things is in June 63, Harvey makes a request for getting security clearance to have Claire Booth Luce, for your audience, right? Who's the top or one of the top dog at Life magazine.
Yeah, her husband Henry Luce, they own it.
Yeah, with him, right? And okay, so the reason this is important, okay, so she gets clearance to be able to go to Italy, or if Harvey came to the US, he had clearance to be able to talk with her. And for him to ask for that specifically is extremely bizarre. Now, keep in mind, what does she do, right? So you get Life magazine, you have the backyard photos, they confiscate the Zapruder film, they have, they fake the sequence of the pictures to make the Zapruder film look like there's a front shot. But more than that, she's a key sponsor for who? The DRE,
Yeah.
right? She's a key sponsor for their boat raids and everything that disrupts U.S. Russia relations and all that. So there's, so she's sponsoring all this stuff. Why do I have my hand raised there? But okay, but it doesn't make any sense. So when you see something of that nature, right, and you almost get the feeling, hey, like the perpetrators, because my feeling is that the orders or the project to kill JFK is no later than around the missile crisis. Okay,
Right.
that's, to me, it's no later than. Is it earlier? We may find signs. Okay, the next question is the way you handle an assassination for the CIA is you get out of the DPP. Okay, you get out of the normal channels, right? And the green lighter might be a guy like Fitzgerald, maybe a guy like Lansdale, okay, who gets the green light. What he'll do is he'll bypass short circuit, right, the normal channel, and he'll go and pick out the one officer that they'll want to work with. Okay, and that officer will keep things pretty contained, very on a need-to-know basis, and then he will outsource. He'll outsource to a QJ Win. Okay, a QJ Win, find me the talent, but the talent doesn't know you're finding them for me. You're just going to give them a contract. You're going to do it for money. Okay, it could be the Russians, it could be that, but it's not me. Okay, so then it becomes deniable, right? So that's kind of how you want to do it. But if you're William Harvey, you want assurances that if I do it, you'll have my back.
Mhm.
Okay, you're going to have my back. So the person who tells him that has to, instill enough confidence in him and say, well, if it's coming from him, it's valid. But I don't want the press all over me. I want the inquiry that goes on to totally have the backs of me and my team. Okay, will they throw in, will they throw a few people under the bus? Maybe, I don't know. But so that makes me wonder if the quickness at which the Zapruder film was bought and hidden and everything, and the backyard photo, the speed at which that had to be, in my view, part of the planning ahead of time.
Yes.
Right? It had to be part of the planning. It didn't just happen out of the, okay, hey, look, we got that. So that's what makes that meeting, okay. And you're right. She's close to Phillips and to there'd be links between her, Phillips, and Harvey between us. So it's suspicious. Is there a smoking gun?
Well, when you
But
put
it's
it all
very
together, it
suspicious.
could be a smoking gun when you put everything together. But the thing on Harvey, one of the things we just had Jefferson Morley on about a month ago, and we talked about that document where the CIA requested from the FAA phony credentials for Harvey to be traveling in the United States. And I think that's super, super important because that was shortly after he met with Johnny Roselli, and the FBI seen him with Roselli. They went back to the CIA. Angleton kind of protects him, tells him, nothing to see there. And then here's Harvey. And Harvey would, at this time, we know the thing that happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Kennedy's want him fired, and Richard Helms saves him by sending him to be Rome section chief. But he would have no reason to be traveling with a flash ID because section chiefs usually travel under cover of the State Department. And he would have no reason. There's nothing under his duties as State Department or as section chief to be having phony FAA credentials. Like, there's no explanation to explain that.
No, there's not, because the Kennedys wanted him fired.
They did.
they wanted him out. And something said, well, we have sort of, we'll exile him. Okay, we'll make him. So for him to all of a sudden get this stuff to be able to go back to the US and do that, like it stinks to high heaven. There's no doubt about it. But because look, Harvey was blamed for sabotaging the diplomacy
Sure.
between the Russians and the Kennedys
Yeah.
during the missile crisis.
Right,
He sends a mission
Yeah.
of people to attack Cuba. I mean, that could have been nuclear war right there. So you don't want this guy around anymore. Plus, he's an alcoholic. He's completely lost his whereabouts. And so, yeah, I agree with you.
Go ahead, Mark.
No. What do you want to follow up on? I mean, Paul cranked it out so good.
Well, what I want to ask you about, Mark, let's kind of backtrack a little bit. I want to ask you about your letter to Luna that you sent to Congresswoman Luna.
Yeah. Well, I've sent two actually. One in August. That was a recap of mainly the importance of Judge Thunheim's testimony about the difficulties faced by the review board that he talked about so in great detail on May 20th. And the main document I focus on that letter was a CIA memo from February of 1992 that Andrew identified and realized Andrew Eiler realized the importance of it. And in this memo, the CIA historical group wrote to the director of intelligence, said, "Look, we have this HSCA sequestered collection, all the records that we gave over to Congress in the late 70s under an agreement with the congressional leaders for that they could review them and as part of their investigation, but they were sequestered in the archives to be. And if you look at the end of the Stone movie, JFK, they had an agreement that those records would be under lock and seal until 2029, which of course caused so much outrage that they passed the JFK Records Act after the movie. So it's very good that happened. Although we're still in now 2025 and 2029 is right around the corner, right? And so it's kind of ironic to think that we're still there. But I wrote to Representative Liu and I said, hey, we don't know the precise status of this sequestered collection yet. We know that the CIA was very concerned about the sensitivity of the records they provided to Congress in the late 70s, and they were anticipating an independent agency having the right to go into that collection and fully declassify it. And that agency was the Assassination Records Review Board created by the law. So you had the movie putting incredible pressure and a public spotlight on the CIA's involvement in the case. You had the statute that was being created only months later. So at this time, the CIA wrote an internal memo on how to deal with this. How do we still maintain control of this extra sensitive collection when it gets back to Congress, but this time with the review board having the full authority to declassify it, unless we can give them a great reason not to 30 plus years later, this being in the early 90s. And so they essentially said on paper, let's just get everything over to the National Archives in a hurry, and we'll get it there and keep it in a protected collection to continue review and declassification on our terms, not the review board's terms. Because the review board came in, Judge Thunheim's board, and they looked at every document with the immediate presumption that it would be disclosed by then. Because here you're talking 30 years after the assassination.
Yeah.
The law was so powerful that it said, look, unless it's a crazy rare circumstance, we're releasing it. So the CIA was very concerned about that, and it appeared on paper that they created a plan to keep those records under their control as much as possible. And Judge Thunheim was very clear on May 20th and on his feelings on the matter, the difficulties with getting any records from the CIA. They would take several hours to object to a single record. they were waiting them out until their work was done due to time and funding in late 1998. And so my
Right.
question to Representative Luna is like, well, after 1998, when the review board was done until 2017, and in fact until today, you should look at, please, the status of that collection. They're congressional records, they're House records, and that it's a House Oversight Committee. So I thought it was very important to put that on their radar. I didn't get any follow up to that letter, and I can only hope that there'll be a plan going forward to for Congress to expedite the release of those records, and that's what the law has required since 1992.
So,
Right?
can I ask a follow-up
Yeah.
question? With the talk with the clock ticking on this task force, because it is set to expire, in early 2026. And I know we had Jefferson Morley on. He said it could be extended. Do you think that this will happen, or do you think this task force is going to expire and we're going to have to wait another 50 years for these additional records to be released?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think the task force expiration is really the it shouldn't be the problem, because the task force was, in my view, related to President Trump's order on preventing secrecy. Okay, the time it's long since time now to release all these records, both on the Kennedy case, the JFK case, but RFK, MLK, and other, and primarily those assassinations of the 60s. And so the ball was started for sure. The ball got rolling. Public attention was on it again. Great witnesses, living witnesses that were part of investigations. And there'll be a report, hopefully, on what we've learned in 2025 and what work is still to be done. And the work to be done is by the congressional oversight committees. Luna's committee task force is part of the House Oversight and Accounting Committee. There's also a Senate equivalent of oversight, and those committees can look at the remaining records, that the church committee records that the review board struggled so hard to get declassified, the Hart-Schweiker files I mentioned, which should be part of the church committee holdings. Paul knows Malcolm Blunt very well. Malcolm, a legendary British researcher, on three different occasions at the National Archives tried to get his hands on the Hart-Schweiker files that we mentioned, we talked about earlier in the show, Richard Schweiker's files and report. Malcolm can't get them. He has asked every which way to Sunday for them to take him to the legislative archives for access to the Hart-Schweiker files, and things like that are all part of these congressional holdings. The JFK Act has no exception for them. All investigative files of the 70s, church, Pike Committee, of course, the HSCA, are all supposed to be part of the JFK collection at the National Archives. And if there's still sensitivity in those records, fine. At least make sure they're in an organized collection with an index that's searchable for researchers. And if there's still records that need to be protected, they could restart the review board. The law is still on the books, and they could have an independent board come in again and finish the job that Judge Thunheim's board just couldn't get done in 4 years.
So if I can chime in on that, what Mark is saying is so important, and that's where Andrew and Mark's work is. I mean, you can imagine that the ones that we don't have access to are probably the most revealing. Because when you go through Mary Farrell, whatever, you look at 104 documents, which are the CIA ones, they're hard to read. They've got cryptonyms, and one by one, you have to go through 1,000 before you get just a couple of really, stunners. You'll get better, you'll get interesting ones from the church committee. Those are different numbered files because you'll get investigators who analyze that stuff and questioned witnesses, and then they'll come in with a larger file that is written in a way the layman can understand it more than an FBI, CIA file. So, for instance, we know that there's a Fair Play for Cuba Committee 300 file, and it's got hundreds of pages, hundreds. That's crucial because If Lopez is linked to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, if Oswald is linked to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, if Nagel is linked to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, Santiago Garriga, and the list goes on, what you're going to find likely is the whole informant program within those files, because all these people that joined, towards the end, many were informants. They'd go in and they'd see, well, who's coming to the meetings and who's applying to join and whatever. That's most likely what Oswald was doing for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. So those files are crucial. Now, how do you get them? So this is my problem with the Luna Committee in a way, is that I'm really happy it's not a Posner who's the right hand man. I'm happy about that. Okay. But I am unhappy that it's not democratic enough. In other words, there should be wider input, I think, in terms of guiding these people like Luna, who are probably very well-meaning, but have to be educated and have to be given direction. So who is doing that? And people have to know how to stay in their lanes, all right? They have to. So I think there's many areas that aren't being explored or not being discussed because the doors aren't being opened wide enough. Now, you don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry, to weigh in, because that's just going to throw everybody off. But you should have a Malcolm Blunt. You should have a Jim DiEugenio. You should have an Alan Dale, who can talk to these people and give them, say, hey, why isn't this missing, or why didn't this happen? So it's not, the doors aren't open wide enough. And what I'm afraid of is that you're going to get a report that is going to be, too focused on maybe Joannides or a character here, or Angleton or whatever. Maybe not. We'll see. And things like the Pepe letters, or things like David Atlee Phillips or whatever, won't be top of mind. And that's my area of concern. So, the good news is Luna said, hey, there's at least two shooters. So that's great vindication. But in terms of where does it take us after that, I just
Yeah.
find there's not enough people of the great researchers weighing in, and that's
Yeah. Yeah, Larry Hancock did a presentation at Lancer a few weeks ago, and he gave a follow-up talk on it. He had a pretty good idea, and I think it's kind of similar to what Paul said. Is like, look, the JM Wave records. Okay, there's obviously sensitive records generated that pertain to that section. One of the things the report should recommend is having a designated room at the National Archives for all the JM Wave records, and you could have an experienced researcher or two that knows what to look for, knows what's relevant, knows how to organize it properly by code names and various different topics, and have an exhaustive, focused search and organized disclosure of that particular subset of records. And that type of organization, you could have one on Mexico City and the different parts of the case that need more investigation.
We don't know
that's good.
how many exact records are still left out there,
No,
right?
no. In fact, when now I've come to learn, Sean, and I used to kind of try to speculate when I started working on this in 2017 and
Yeah,
started writing articles on it. When anyone says there's X amount of files still withheld, or X amount of files still that are at NARA that are being who the heck knows what the number is? Be
yeah,
honest, because until you have a catalog and index and an
sure,
inventory of everything that went to the National Archives in 1992 when this law was passed, and there's a way to track the releases that happened between 2017 and today. If you have nothing to track it back to, you don't know the number.
right, right.
I mean, I firmly believe that today. I used to think there was people would throw out numbers like 15,000 or 3,000. We know that 73,000 records in total have been released on the NARA's website since 2017, when Trump issued a delay, but then later into 2018 they started kind of releasing batches of records. In total, it was 73,000. But how many were duplicates or re-releases or re-redactions? You can't know until you tie it back to an index. And of course, Andrew, in his discoveries of the review board's final orders, we don't know if any of those have been respected in full. And that's 27,000 records that the review board voted on for disclosure. And we don't know if those are in compliance either.
There's an important thing I want to say before we go over this. Like someone who's listening to this show for the first time and without too much context might have the thought that, people like Mark and Paul just won't be satisfied because they're not finding the things they want to find and this and that. You have to keep in mind that what was released between the 1990s and the latest release, you have enough smoking guns in there okay, like let me mention a few obvious ones. But when people got to see the Parkland and Bethesda doctor's rendering of the back of the head wound, right? Nobody knew about that before, but it showed an exit wound. That was huge. The Lopez report, even though it was redacted, clearly showed that someone impersonated Oswald in Mexico City. Again, absolutely huge.
Right.
Okay, so I would tell you the Pepe letters and what we're finding in them, and black letters in general, there's no other explanation that there is a guiding hand in my view right now, and more people are saying that. So, it's not as if, oh, well, they released something, there's nothing there. And unfortunately, there are organizations like ABC who, are so brain dead on this issue. I mean, it's crazy that come up and they do their specials
That was
but
terrible.
they don't
That
even
most-
recognize, sorry? They
that
don't
most
recognize
special was terrible.
the historical record of what has come out.
No.
Okay. I mean, Luna is saying right now there were two shooters. Okay. That's
Right.
historical. That if you're looking and you're going back to the Warren Commission and you want to take that out of the mothballs, and say, well, here's your proof that, and you forget about what the HSC said, probable conspiracy. Church
Right.
Committee concluded that the Warren Commission didn't do a good job, right? So, I mean, look, you have all this stuff that we're sitting on, but what we're missing really is it's not proof of a conspiracy. That's done. I don't even talk about it anymore, okay? What we're missing are the documents that really nail down the modus operandum, the people behind it, okay? Motive and all that. We don't have enough in that area. But there's more than enough to say this is a cold case, right?
Mm.
There's way more than that. So just for your audience, that's where there's still resistance. So that I thought it would be important to note that because sometimes the way the other side plays it is as well. What came out in the most recent releases, we didn't need the Luna releases to be where we're at today. Okay,
Sure.
it helps. But the job was already done.
Yeah, we definitely have more pieces to the puzzle than we've ever had, but we still don't have the complete picture. And I think, Paul, there's always going to be people who say, "Well, until I see the complete picture, I'm not gonna believe any of it." But there's nothing you can do about that. It's just, keep collecting the information that we're getting, putting this together, and eventually, hopefully someday we'll have the complete picture of what happened.
And Bill, who says that? It's history book writers, because I did a study on history book writers, and they said until you tell me what really happened. Well, I mean that's so silly. You can have a murder. You can have a murder, and it's a conspiracy just by the blood and the forensics,
Right?
Without solving it.
That's
But
just
there's a conspiracy. But they say, "Oh, I'm not buying into the conspiracy until you tell me who shot." I said,
There's no logic there. Oswald, it's game over.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not logical. My 7-year-old son at the time when we were reading this stuff, well, that's not logical. I said, hey, you wouldn't want to have him as a teacher. There's nothing, he probably he says, you're going to have to show me that 1 + 1 is 2. Okay, show it to me until I see it, or you can't go anywhere with that. But that's, I just wanted to make sure. You're right, Bill. I mean, I had grown historians answer that to me. If it wasn't Oswald, tell me what it was.
We hear
Okay.
that all the time, Paul.
Yeah.
The people who educated people who say, well, I don't believe it until I know until you can tell me who did it, or you show me a picture, or you show me a document that's signed by somebody that says I shot Kennedy. I'm not going to believe it wasn't Oswald. I mean, there's nothing you could do about that. I mean, those, you know,
It's not logical.
no, no, definitely.
But you mentioned that ABC special. That was so poorly done, and just the fact that they had Jim on there, they had Jefferson Morley, they had Oliver Stone, they even had Loon on there, and they just didn't really give them their fair shake at all. And as soon as I seen Dale Myers on there, I knew this was a whitewash. And I text Billy as soon as I see Dale Myers, I told him don't even turn it on because this is going to be crap. Because he's been a long time disinformation guy with his nonsense about the magic bullet and stuff. So I knew that was going to be, but that was such a waste of time and just such a missed opportunity, really, when you think about it,
Well,
because you had access to Jim and Jefferson and Oliver Stone, and just what a waste! What a waste!
uh, go ahead, Mark. Yeah, I don't know if you have a
No,
comment on that.
it was a waste. And I remember my mom, she's 72, and she texted me like 3 days before it came out. Oh, there's going to be a new special on Monday night on ABC, and I said, Mom, who's speaking, who's presenting? These are the questions you got to ask, because but unless to most members of the public, they're going to tune in and be like, oh, there's new information, and so I told her to pump the brakes, don't get too excited.
Yep, yep.
Hey, here's the funny thing. So I decided to write to, I read what Oliver Stone had to say. I followed him on X because he was deeply disappointed and felt he was misled, as was Jim DiEugenio. So I decided to write to Eileen Murphy of ABC. And now I had to put it off because, believe it or not, with all your new regulations, it's so hard to send a book from Canada to the US. You wouldn't believe it there. Okay,
I
we have to go
believe.
through customs. They want to charge a tariff. I almost need a university course to figure it out, but that's another story. So I had Jim send it for me, and I'll just read you a few passages, what I'm hoping she could read in the new year. Okay. So Eileen Murphy, senior producer, ABC News. Okay, dear Mr. Murphy, I'm corresponding with you after being made aware of how Jim DiEugenio and Oliver Stone felt about their most recent experience on your network. And then I give my credentials, and I talk about my concern about, what's going on in the US just generally. Okay, and all that. I said, ask yourself the question, what word do your citizens equate with politician and media? Write it down, and maybe we can compare this word if ever we could correspond. Now, we'll discuss. I'll ask you three to have a word. If you had to put a word, what word most corresponds with the words politician, media. We'll get there later. ABC, in my humble opinion, is one of the causes of this chasm that has formed and grown steadily between you and the people you aim to serve. Studies prove that the starting point of this steady march towards chaos was the fairy tale written up by the Warren Commission. And by the way, that's true. Studies show that. Trust in your institutions preceding JFK's death was at a high point before beginning its downward spiral towards rock bottom. ABC and the rest of the Fourth Estate turned into cheerleaders for the ensuing whitewash and continued the lone nut narrative all the way up to your most recent production, Truth and Lies. Add to this how Americans were deceived about the murders of RFK, Malcolm X, MLK, the war in Vietnam, Watergate, weapons of mass destruction, Iran-Contra, Epstein, etc. And you have all the seeds needed to cultivate fascism. With this, mainstream media has seen its credibility scrape the bottom of the barrel. As a marketer, I do not believe Truth and Lies will help turn the tide on your sagging ratings and reputation. On the other hand, if you want to perform real journalism around the granddaddy of your demise in credibility, I suggest you begin by reading the JFK Assassination chokeholds as a
Wow.
starting point for a real quest for the truth, rather than wasting your dwindling audience's time with yet more rounds of tired, desperate attempts at stemming the flow of ridicule you are needlessly subjecting yourself to. I am offering you this gift, so I'm sending her the book. And if you read it, you'll find out that it was written by me, that it has all sorts of sources, so on. You'll learn that 7 government inquiries into this tragic event and the people assigned to them cumulatively destroy the Warren Commission and refute the lone nut version of events your expert guests cling to. Oswald had numerous links with intelligence. Ruby was given the mission to remove the most dangerous witness. Some shots came from the front, the signal, but and I go on and on. Okay. Do you not think it is time for ABC to turn a new leaf and perhaps regain the trust of people like me? If so, start by taking on your bête noire head on. Tell the truth and explain the real lies about the conspiracy. Has ABC really taken the time to understand the information that has surfaced since the ARB was set up to ensure declassification, thanks to Mr. Stone's movie JFK? At one time, Canadians were proud of fellow Canadian Peter Jennings, and the US had high regard for ABC. Even Old Spice successfully renewed its brand. Is it not time for you to do the same? Sorry for this harsh language, but sometimes it is good to hear the truth and stay clear of the lies. Happy holidays. A concerned neighbor. I thought I said that to you.
Excellent.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to hijack the show, but that you'll be receiving hopefully in a few days. And that'd be the end of it for me.
Really
Nice
good,
job.
really good.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was more therapy for me because I don't know who wrote it, but I just found it to be very soothing, and then I had a good beer.
That was really good, really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic.
Um, I do want to ask one last thing though to wrap it up. If Mark just wants to give us a little overview of his time at the Lancer conference and
Yeah.
your speech there, Mark, if you want to tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. I went, it was what, 3 weeks ago. The fun part of those is meeting new people and reconnecting with colleagues and so that we had a lot of that. Andrew Eiler and I got to present on the status of the records and talked a little bit about the some of the things we mentioned today, the review board struggles, his research on the final determinations and what the status is of those, and we're working on expanding on that work. There'll be an article up on Jim Kennedy's and King in the near future on the what we are perceiving as the attacks on both the movie and the Records Act, because you have to look at Oliver's movie and the ensuing statute kind of one and the same, and the documented events of attacks and withholdings and obstruction of the statute that really was well intended, but we're still struggling with it. So we got to do that. That was great. And then Matt Crumpton was there, our co-author on Chokeholds. He did a presentation on what it's like to podcast. So you guys could tune in and watch that because yours is one of the best, and the audience that they're being able to reach. I think one of the coolest things we did, we had breakfast on Sunday morning, and we happened to realize we were near the city jail, right? So Matt's doing this little cameo video thing the whole weekend, and he rented a car and he went to every single assassination site you can think of in Fort Worth and Dallas, right? And did a little video, did a show on it. He goes, we're close to the city jail. Let's go find the Main Street garage and see, if Ruby could have gone. We know that's all a bunch of nonsense. We ran into Paul Abbott and Jess Cannell. They were doing a little side video, and Paul was all the way from Australia to talk at Lancer, and he told us all the nitty gritty and the research on how he believes that Ruby got into the city jail, and it wasn't,
Right.
of course, the Warren Commission's version. So that was one of the it was a random meetup, but just the chance to talk to researchers that have this expertise and traveling that far. Met a bunch of people from the UK that were there,
Mark,
interested in
if I can
chokeholds
chime in,
and
so, Mark, I don't want to cut you off, but just so you know, Paul Abbott wrote the
yeah,
only book
Yeah.
on the Oswald assassination, and he has one of the best exposés
Yep.
I've ever seen of what went on during those 2 days in that jail. But go on, Mark. I didn't want to
No,
cut you off.
no, it's so I think it was awesome. It went by really fast, and just the chance to talk about the latest and greatest, and they do have a competing conference, and that's one thing that I hope in the future they can all bring together. Judith Baker has a conference at the same exact time, and so that hopefully that's something that can be made more efficient. But we went to Dealey Plaza on 12:30 on November 22nd, and it was hijacked by a parade of antique cars driving through Dealey Plaza right at 12:30 during their ceremony. So that was kind of a shame. I don't know who orchestrated that, but we were front row seats to that. So
Wow.
Wow.
Stuff.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it as usual. You coming on with us and giving our audience so much good stuff. So we look forward to hearing from you guys again. And thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Happy holidays to you guys and your audience.
Thank you. You
for
too.
having us. And, if I can share some of the good weather you think you're seeing for everyone. But thanks so much, guys. You always do a great job.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it.
great show as always. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Take care. See you, Mark.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.